Okay, so today I am going to be doing a review of A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, which is book 2 in the Wayfarers series. These are all companion novels. I have already put up a review of the first book, which I will link. I will be reviewing the third and fourth book, which I will also link once those go up. As always for my reviews, there will be timestamps below. There will be little things here or here of what I'm talking about in each section. And generally speaking, what I'm going to be talking about is, can you read this before the first book? Genre, plot, difficulty, writing, pace and structure, world building and lore, characters, and the science level. Some of these are going to be a little bit repetitive because of what I covered in the first review, so if you have watched that, maybe you want to skip over some parts. Maybe you just want to sit and watch my face this whole time. Who knows? Let's start out with, do you have to read these books in order? Do you have to read the first book to get into the second book? And it depends on if you want to be spoiled. These are companion novels. So we're not following the crew on the I think it is the Wayfarer is the name of the ship. We're not following that crew from the first book. We're following a side character we met and one person from the crew. And I'm not going to spoil who that is in case you're watching this and you haven't read the first one. I would say that if you haven't read the first book, don't read this one first, because first off, you'll be spoiled what happens at the end with some of the characters, because that's where this kind of picks up. This picks up like a few chapters away from the end of the first book. There's a lot of world building in the first one with respect to how the world is built up, how like the political system is built up, specific types of species or aliens or whatever you want to call them that are explored in more depth in the first book because you are with them. They're part of the crew, or they're characters that kind of keep repeating throughout the book, and it gives you just more context. I will say, if you don't want to be spoiled, do not read the synopsis on Goodreads. Do not read the back of the book. It will spoil you for what happens at the end of the first book. Also, throughout this review, I'm going to probably be comparing the specific notions to the first book so that you could kind of understand. If you've read the first book, you can kind of understand the differences, because there's quite a bit in terms of structure and like the type of things that it's exploring and how it's exploring those things that may change your mind on if you would like this or not. Because I have seen people really loving the first book and then not liking the second book because it's just formatted a bit differently. All right, genre. Again, this is science fiction. It's a bit more lighthearted. It's, as I described for the first one, more like a warm blanket of science fiction around you. Like, there are stakes for sure, but they're not like, the world will end if this doesn't happen. It's more like stakes on like a personal level. Science level, I would say that this one, while still very beginner level, still good for like people who have science degrees, at least if it's not super technical. I have no idea. My science degree isn't that technical. And for people who don't know anything about science, I think both groups of people would enjoy this. That being said, there is a little bit more talk of technology in this one. There's a lot of instances in this book where we're building a ship, or we're fixing things, we're working with like mechanics of stuff. So because of that, it is like a little bit more technical. Plot of this book. So we have two characters that don't know each other, and one character is very, I'm trying to do this without spoilers, okay? One character is very new to life and is in a body that is uncomfortable for them. And there's another character that was a side character from the last book who we get her backstory and we see her living with this other character. The main plot of the book is learning the past of one of the characters and how they got to where they are today, and following in this how we are today, that character and the new character who is uncomfortable in their body, and exploring identity and humanity and what it is to be human. It is exploring it through the context of like self-discovery and self-identity, and then exploring it through the context of the people they interact with and the prejudices people might have against each other for things that they can't help. And it's so vague, but that is all I'm giving you. Now let's go into pace and structure. So this book is structured a little bit differently. So with the last one, it was kind of serial, as I said in my last video, but it's chronological. We're going in order of events. In this one, we have two timelines. We have one of exploring that character's past, and we have another of like the current timeline. So it kind of jumps back and forth between those two timelines, and we start in the past with the character at the age of like maybe 10, I don't remember. She's fairly young, and we follow her until she escapes her circumstance and gets to where she is today. So we follow about 10 years of her life throughout this book, so there's a lot of time jumps. Some people do not like dual timeline. I'm not usually, well, it depends. I can go either way on dual timeline. I thought it worked here, especially towards the end, because at the beginning the chapters were a little bit longer for each section, so you were kind of getting more time to learn things and to understand things before you got pulled into a different time. But then once you were familiar enough with these two perspectives and these two timelines, the chapters started getting shorter and shorter as like things were happening. So the pacing got a lot faster, and it was like a lot more, like there was a lot more momentum at the end of the book, which I just thought was a strong and smart move from the author and editor. I will say, I'm iffy about young narrators. In the past, this character you're following, she is sheltered and doesn't know a lot of words and doesn't know anything kind of outside of the scope of what she's been told. So when she starts, her language and her vocabulary is very small because they didn't need to have a big vocabulary. And so it comes off as like almost babyish and young. And as time goes and she ages, there are more words that are being used. And I think like it makes sense because that's like actually how life works. And as your vocabulary kind of explodes as time goes on. But I find it annoying. It went away. It's not like a huge negative of the book. I was able to like get over it. For those people like me who really have a hard time with some child narrators, that might bother you. World building, it's about the same as the last one. Like you see two worlds in more depth because of the two timelines. It describes it in a way where it's reminiscent of things that you've already seen and heard and understand. So it builds a picture in your head, but it's not like she paints the room for you. She's not painting everything for you. And I think that how the book and how these places are described also kind of in a indirect way tells you a bit more about the politics and the structure of the world while not really getting into politics. There is conversations of like, why are things the way they are? Why don't we treat this group of sentients in a specific way? But there's not a political intrigue. But we do get a closer, deeper dive into a specific alien form, which is aliens. These are the species that don't have vocal cords and don't have mouths, and they have to have something implanted to be able to interact with people. And they talk through like expressions of color and hue on their face. So for like the layperson or for a non-Aliuan, it's very hard to read. And in this, the Aliuan that you meet, who is in like the present timeline, is a specific type where they change gender fairly frequently. So there's a bouncing between pronouns as they change their gender month by month or however often it happens. And that was an interesting exploration of what gender and sex can look like in other species, and kind of just points to how gender itself is a social construct, which I appreciated in the context of this book, because, you know, not all species are going to look the same. They're not going to parent the same. Obviously, that happens on Earth, but it's also going to happen in what we consider sentient species as well, or intelligent species, or whatever you want to call them. I think that sometimes people don't like this book as much is because your character focus is like shrunk, and you really only have a few main characters, and you are going a lot deeper into the exploration of these characters, what makes them who they are, how their bodies affect them, and how they build comfortability in their bodies, and acceptance of themselves and societal acceptance of them. It didn't feel as on the nose as the first book, which I appreciated more. Like it was having the conversation in a very upfront manner, but it wasn't telling you this is exactly what you should take away from this moment and this chapter. It wasn't as much like that, which I appreciated actually more. I think I liked this book more than I liked the last one. So yeah, another theme of this book is found families. This was explored in the first book, but it was also explored in the second book. I think it's just a theme that's going to keep coming up as both of these characters didn't have families for whatever circumstances that they were in the past and present. They have to find those people that they relate to and find bonds outside of the typical nuclear family structure. Okay, a final thought, which really has nothing to do with a review, but there's the Aliuan is a tattoo artist, and there's scenes where you watch this Aliuan tattoo people, and then there's a scene where one of your main characters gets tattooed, and the description of the interaction and like how the piece came together and the vibe of it, I've never seen that described in a book before, and I found it very accurate to my experience. As you can see, I have a full sleeve that maybe I'll do a video on at some point. I mean, it's an intimate process. This person is like putting ink into your skin, and like they are for hours, you know. This is just showing it off because I think it's cool, and this kind of looks like an alien. It's hours and hours of labor, of love into your body, and something that you spend the rest of your life with. And there's also in that identity discussion of identity through changing your body, which actually does also come up in the first book. One of the characters has tattoos all down their arms. And you can also modify yourself in different ways in this world, and that modification is a way of expressing yourself and how you want to be seen and how you feel you should look. I'm not saying that that's what my tattoo is. I really just think it's cool artwork. But the experience of getting a tattoo was so perfectly for me described that if anyone is interested in what that process looks like, mind you, the character in the book that has this happen does not have any pain receptors, so they can't describe that part to you. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that as well. Overall, again, difficulty. This is after you read the first book, although you could read it out of order if you really wanted to. This is a great, nice entry level into science fiction. It's good for YA, going to adult, or just any level who wants to read and appreciate this, doesn't want anything too sciencey, while still not being, at least from what my understanding, inaccurate. That's all I got for this video. I will link the one to the first below and the next two as I make them. If you're new to my channel and this is one of the first videos you're watching, hello! I make reviews of science fiction, fantasy, other books as I read them with some frequency. I have a playlist of all of those reviews. If you care to see or learn about other books, I would encourage you to give that a watch. But that is all I got. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you read this book. Let me know if you liked it more or less, and how it fared compared to the first book. And until next time, happy reading.